Hi, I'm Angie Hilton and welcome to Unbreakable Entrepreneurs. As business owners, major challenges are inevitable. So how do we steel ourselves to weather the storms? Here, you'll find real-life stories of resilience, as well as tips from thought leaders and mental health experts on how to become unbreakable entrepreneurs. Olly Bridge trained as a sport and exercise scientist. Olly has worked with the likes of Jenson Button and Mark Webber at Benetton Renault Formula One and the British Olympic gymnastics team. Now, as head of digital health and wellbeing at Medibank, Olly has access to 3.8 million lives, and by merging his passion and knowledge of exercise science with his personal experience of a demanding corporate career, he is perfectly placed to make a real difference at scale. Olly Bridge, so good to see you.
Nice to see you too, Angie.
You have the best background I think I've ever seen in a Zoom meeting. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, I have to say it's been one of the best icebreakers I could have done for the last sort of 18 months, 2 years of homeschooling and COVID lockdowns and so on, and here in Melbourne, roughly about 250 days of lockdown. So I'm a bit of a petrol head. My dad was, and I grew up smelling oil and axle grease as a little boy. And the car that you see behind has been sort of 10 years worth of hard work building it up to its current state. It's a replica of a 1957 Porsche 356. So the car that James Dean made pretty famous, or if you're of the 80s and 90s children, you'll probably see Dylan from 90210 or Kelly McGuinness from Top Gun as driving the same kind of car.
Wow.
It's taken a bit of effort, but a great conversation starter.
So impressive. Do you actually get to take it out much, or does it like to live in the garage so it's protected?
No, it's not a garage queen. I take it. It used to be my daily drive. It was the only way I could get it kind of registered and running. You'll see it quite a few weekends down at Bunnings with 2x4 sticking out of it like a bit of a ute.
That would be fun to see.
Yeah, it certainly raises a few eyebrows and is a great conversation starter.
Well, so thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and YouTube channel. So for those who have never heard of you, can you give us a snapshot of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Olly Bridge, and I've been working in the health and wellbeing space for around about 20 years now. I started as an exercise physiologist and worked with elite athletes. I worked in F1, obviously the car memorabilia and petrolhead side of me took over. And I worked with like Jenson Button and Mark Webber, and then I worked with England rugby team and British Olympic gymnast team, both male and female. And I really loved working with elite athletes because they're incredibly focused, and you can really, really be involved in some great events and really help shape their success. But it's kind of limited in its approach. And so I transitioned into the corporate space and helping corporates with their health and well-being relatively early on. And about 15 years ago, I started the business Build a Bridge because I wanted to help people build a bridge to the life they wanted, not necessarily the life that they had. And to be brutally honest, it was a bit of a dirty secret. Like I started it as a side hustle while I still had full-time jobs, and I still have another full-time role growing a digital health company. But for me, I really got a buzz out of dealing one-on-one or one to a few in group workshops about really helping people to get access to the life that they wanted. And actually, the more senior I got, and I was head of health and wellbeing for Medibank for almost a decade, whilst those roles were great, what I found was that the more senior I got, unfortunately, the further away from the people that I was helping I got. And a friend from the UK who's a fireman sort of talked about it in the same way. He said, I started the fire service because I love to fight fires. And actually, Olly, from the office I'm in now, I can't even smell smoke. And it was the same kind of thing. I realized the more senior I got, the further away I got from the magic. And I started Build a Bridge because selfishly, I wanted that magic back. I wanted to work with people and really, really be able to help people. So that dirty little secret or side hustle grew and grew and grew. And I think that with the gig economy and with more divergent thinking in the workplace and more progressive leaders within businesses now, those side hustles are really kind of starting to be a bit welcomed and starting to be really seen as an important adjunct to getting the best out of people, so that they may have different itches that they need to scratch. And certainly for me, the seniority and growing in large businesses was an itch that I really wanted to scratch. But I didn't want to miss that magic that I'd grown up with working with elite athletes. Obviously, you get to really scratch that itch, and being able to use the learnings from sports science and bring it into the corporate world to allow people to benefit from all of that science, I find fascinating. And that's really my life's mission, really.
That's amazing. So the Geelong Chamber of Commerce obviously has a lot of members and many small businesses. Are there any common threads that you think you just go into a business and you can see time and time again these essential things that could be quite life-changing for everyone involved?
Yes, and the irony for me is it doesn't matter whether it's a small business or a big business. The truth is that if you authentically and genuinely believe that the well-being of your people is important, and there's a plethora of information out there that proves that to be the case, then you really need to bring it into the fabric of the culture of the place. And that comes from leadership role modeling, that comes from authentic and really that empathetic leaders that actually understand that we aren't just our corporate selves and wearing that corporate mask that we have done for years and years. Actually, to get the best out of people and give the people the best experience, we need to treat them as a whole human, and we need to think about their well-being. And so from an onboarding point of view, from a check-ins point of view, from a KPIs point of view, from a board reporting point of view, all of that, there needs to be a well-being and a wellness thread that goes through all of that. Otherwise, it is just tokenism. And if I can be honest, one of the frustrations of the last 20 years working in this space for me has been that tokenism. Mm-hmm. You know, having fruit in the kitchen area, having yoga at lunchtime, and having Are You OK Day isn't a sufficient well-being program. And it's not strategic enough. It's not in the fabric of the place. And actually, it doesn't solve the root causes and the systemic problems that may be in the business that looks at the psychological well-being of people, the whole body, the whole self, and actually saying, what do my people need to flourish in the workplace that I'm providing? And I'll be honest, I've not seen anywhere, big or small, where that's not applicable. You know, people genuinely connect with people that care. Mm-hmm. And so that, I think, is a absolute non-negotiable if you want to make an impact when it comes to workplace well-being.
So you've seen businesses time and time again transform by the key things that you're bringing in?
Yeah, and actually, it's I'd love to say it was me, but often I'm almost like a happy accident. For me, a lot of the time, it does depend on the leadership team within the business, and sometimes it comes from a change. Sometimes when a new leader, a new CEO, CFO, someone from the C-suite comes in, or a new owner, when they come in and they genuinely and authentically believe that the key to their success is happy, healthy people, that's when the magic happens. And so I can really help open people's eyes, and I can help with some strategies, and I can help with really identifying where those systemic problems are and what things you can do to remedy them. But unless there's a leadership team there that genuinely gets it and really sees that as a success factor, I really struggle. I've got to be honest, unless there is that real at the top leadership, because they say fish rots from the head. It's so critical that we have a connection, the leadership team and myself, and that there is the real unrelenting passion to help their people and help their people inside and outside of work. I don't think our obligation to our people stops at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whenever they choose to log off. And especially during COVID, when I shut my laptop screen and I'm sitting in the kitchen of my own home, and I've been trying to homeschool during the day, and this hybrid workforce now, those lines are becoming more and more blurred. And we've been gifted, to be honest, we've been gifted with this environment where we can actually see some of our people's kids running in the back of screens, or the cars, or the real people that are behind potentially some of those corporate masks that have been worn. And I just hope we don't lose that when whatever the new COVID normal becomes into the future. I hope that we're really deliberate about some of the beautiful things that are, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat COVID, it's been terrible. But there are some learnings that I think we've been forced into that it would be a crying shame if we lost that when we went into whatever the future looks like. Absolutely.
So I guess what you're saying is seeing the people that are working as humans, not staff. But then I think, well, these leaders have the pressure of running the business. How is it that they get to know these staff intimately, and what advice do you have around connecting when you're already probably pretty stressed out at the top, but finding time to give to every individual?
Really great question. And Angie, to be honest, I think we have to go back a step as well. Before we have the capacity or the bandwidth to be able to care authentically about the people that we look after, we kind of need to care about ourselves. And so leaders need to prioritize their own self-care management plan. And a lot of the work that I do is exactly on that. For the actual leader themselves, how do they see it as a priority in the same way as an athlete does, that they need to prioritize their own health? It's like fitting your own face mask first on the airplane to be able to care for those other people. Because I think if you get yourself into that position, well, then I say it with a wry smile on my face, but actually caring authentically about your people, you don't need a rule book. You don't need okay, now as my check-ins, I need to ask this question and that question. If you do show empathy and you do genuinely care, the natural way to, whether it's a 2D relationship like we are on screen for this last 18 months, or whether it's 3D in real person, if you notice the energy level of that person change, or they haven't put their camera on for a while, or they're just not themselves, well, then genuinely caring and asking, hey, what's going on for you? I've noticed that your energy's not there, and is there anything I should be aware of? Can I help with? What's going on for you? I think naturally, as we deal with squidgy humans, that's a natural question. But if we keep it in the formal boardroom and formal suits and jackets and ties and pinstripe suits or pencil dresses, we tend not to have those conversations. But unless we do, we're never going to get the best out of people. And obviously, people are different. So some people will feel really comfortable with those conversations and some people won't. But unless we look for empathetic leaders, unless we look for that in the leadership skills of our people as we're promoting them, not just can you manage a spreadsheet or are you a domain expert, but actually, can you get the best out of people by caring for them? At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I think that is really hard to do for other people unless you do it for yourself. And so when you're waking up in the morning as an individual, and one of the things I used to do way back in the day in the early 2000s, before wearables and before you could monitor people's sleep digitally, one of the things that I would do to manage overtraining, so making sure that my athletes weren't overtrained, were two simple things. When you wake up in the morning, take your resting heart rate. Second thing, when you go to the toilet in the morning, how does your wee look? Two simple things. Before digital took over and we had digital readouts, and as a coach, I could remotely see all of my statistics of my athletes on a screen. Those two simple questions allowed an athlete to think, I need to back it off a little bit. I'm feeling tired. My resting heart rate's elevated and I didn't drink enough, or I'm dehydrated. Those are not great signs for an athlete. I'll be honest with you. They're not great signs for the corporate athlete either. So if you are a small business owner and you're waking up feeling absolutely ravaged, we need to look after ourselves. And I know it seems like it's easy to say and very hard to do. My wife is the CEO of a small business. in the fitness industry, which has been absolutely torched, obviously, during COVID. And it's been really hard. And so I think it is a hard thing to do, to practice self-care. But unless you do, I think your capacity to show empathy and your capacity to give that corridor and that safe space for other people to share with you really reduces. And so for me, it has to start with the individual, it has to start with yourself. Otherwise, it becomes sort of a step too far too quickly.
That's such great advice. I mean, for you personally in COVID, has your business been dramatically affected, or have you been more in need than ever? And how's it changed for you?
Yeah, so I am incredibly lucky that I am a risk-adverse person because ultimately for me, that risk-adverse nature meant that I didn't throw the toys out of the pram and just go down the build a bridge route solely. Thank goodness, because a business that is built on keynoted events, working with, facilitating workshops, being face-to-face with people, being really, integrated into the business when the world went digital has been tough, has been really, really tough. So I'm still doing video calls. In fact, I did one between 6 and 7 p.m. last night while the kids were having dinner to a large multinational company. And it was great. But it's not the same as feeling the magic in a room with real people. And so had I just been relying on that, I could well have just been one of those statistics, unfortunately, of small businesses that have gone to the wall during this difficult time. But like I say, because of my risk-adverse nature, I hedged my bets and I still have other means of income to pay the mortgage and keep my kids fed and watered and hopefully smiling. So yes, it's been affected, but luckily I was in a position where I could flex into other areas. But it's heartbreaking. I've spent a lot of time, a lot of effort building my business to a point where it was not only my passion, but it was also starting to be something that I could supply what I needed to my family off. And COVID meant that's not the case anymore. And I will need to build it up again and dust myself off and build it up slowly, but surely.
For someone like yourself who has, you have all the knowledge, you have the toolkit, do you still have the dips where you really have to think, oh, I've got to build myself up again? Or do you feel like you're at a stage where it's so natural that you don't have to try as hard?
Angie, this may come as a bit of an overshare, so I apologize, and you might need to edit it out if it is. Yeah. But for me, I really struggled. So I found myself, unfortunately, sitting down in a bush with my headphones in, with tears running down my face about halfway through lockdown. And it was a real wake-up call for me. I was listening to Brené Brown's podcast, and she was talking about comparative suffering. And I can almost feel myself getting emotional now. It was the one moment where it was that light bulb moment of, wow, she's explaining exactly how I feel. I'd spent the previous 6 months on video calls, talking to team members, talking to people about, hey, I live in a beautiful part of Melbourne. My kids are healthy. I still have a job. People have it a lot worse than me. Her point around, yes, you need perspective, but if you need to give yourself a pity party for just a little while, it's really, really important that you do, because otherwise you're just bottling all of this up. And what I found myself doing was I usually do a lunchtime walk around the block. I usually listen to a podcast because it's my time to just practice learning and practice being in the moment. And like I say, I realized that suddenly, and I live by the beach, so there's a beach track, and I just found myself just overcome with emotion because I was trying to manage 2 school kids, manage full-time work, everything. And it was just all too much. And what I'd really focused on, when I talk about build a bridge, I often talk about this 3-legged stool. And the 3 legs of the stool, to give yourself a nice firm base, is exercise is one of them, recovery is the other, and nutrition is the 3rd leg. And it's about that first thing in the morning, ascertaining actually how are the legs of my stool? Did I do enough incidental activity yesterday? Did I do some high intensity stuff? Did I eat the right fuel? And did I give myself enough space to recover? What I'd found, and I'm an exercise physiologist by training, right? So for me, my knee jerk is to go into the physical stuff. So my workouts are always intense. My workouts are my happy space. But what I found was that was a lever that I was just using relentlessly. And as I was more stressed and more struggling, I was just using that lever, and pretty much that lever broke off in my hand. So I went to the GP, and I hadn't been sleeping so well, and I was irritable. And when I wanted to get my blood work tested, and so I spoke to my GP and said, look, I'm not feeling myself, and my workouts are losing some of their intensity, and I'm not feeling the same buzz. And I thought that maybe my testosterone level had dropped, and I'd see it in blood work. I'm a scientist by nature, so I wanted to see the data. And my GP just turned around to me and said, look, Olly, this is just mild depression. You've got a lot going on in your household right now. Your wife's revenue has dried up by 98%, literally overnight. You're trying to hold down 2 jobs, 2 kids. My wife was working doubly as hard for no money and still trying to get the business afloat and so on. And I coach in this stuff, and I'd missed the kind of incipient kind of degradation of my own mental well-being because I was so focused on other things. And so the reflection for me, and I'm going to be internally grateful for Brené Brown for forever and a day on this, because it was that light bulb moment for even someone like me to go, I've missed the signs. And from an athlete standpoint, I was overtrained. We in the Olympics this year, unfortunately, didn't see Simone Manuel, an amazing American swimmer. We saw her disappear. She won she broke the record in the last Olympics. She won gold. She was the first female athlete to win a gold in the pool on an individual event. And we didn't see her this Olympics because she overtrained and missed the times. And she made a quote in terms of, I picked it up in January, but I didn't really do anything about it. And unbeknownst to me, I ended up in a heap. I'm paraphrasing there, but that was her synopsis of overtraining. And that's what an athlete sees. That's what their care team around them are looking for. We don't have the advantage of having a care team around us to pick up on those signs. And even someone like me who coaches people on this had missed the signs. So that, sorry if it's a bit of an overshare, but me finding myself with tears running down my face, thinking, how on earth am I going to get through this next stage? And being pretty comfortable with having hard conversations with my GP and with my family, and trying to treat a hamstring tear the same way as I would depression. It's just an injury to a different part of the body. Allowed me to really, really quickly, and really with not a huge amount of ramifications other than having to deal with it, of just getting back on track and just saying, okay, I need to do something that's not physical, that gets my recovery leg back onto the ground. So, all of the things that I generally talk about mindfulness practice, about gratitude rituals. We as a family have a gratitude ritual practice every dinner where we share what we're grateful for in the day. Practicing those things and really focusing on them. And I picked up a guitar, which I haven't played since I was 16, 17. I picked up a guitar to give myself some of that space that wasn't work related, that was just about me. And it was amazing how quickly I was able to right the ship. But it took me to be crying in a bush to really pick up on that. So I think for me, the long-winded answer, so I apologize, but for me, it was about absolutely times was being tough, and I let myself down and I let myself go. But I was really, really lucky to have the knowledge and the ability to pull it round nice and quickly, and it didn't escalate. And I know that other people aren't so fortunate. So that for me was a real life learning that hopefully makes me a better coach and makes me better at building bridges for other people.
That's amazing. And possibly with COVID, it may be the first time people are really experiencing those intensely dark feelings. And if that is the case, what are some of the first steps that you would suggest people take in sort of confronting this side of themselves that they may not have known?
So I'm not a psychologist, so I hasten to sort of mention that, but I have worked with a lot of people that are struggling with this kind of thing. And athletes are an interesting cohort to work with because they can have the highest highs and sometimes the lowest lows. And almost some of the lowest lows have been after achieving the highest highs. You know, they say the most dissatisfied person at an athletics meet, for example, is the silver medalist, because they see what they could have got, which is juxtaposition. You think you're the top three, that's amazing. But they focus on the negative. Our brains are wired that way. So in answer to your question, for me personally, the advice that I often give is about, we have to share. We have to share with the support network that we have around us. I'm very, very lucky to have an incredibly supportive and amazing wife. And I've got brilliant children that I can share anything with. And we have a very open conversation over dinner. And being open about daddy not feeling great and daddy needing to do certain things to make sure that he could smile more and make sure that he could get on the right track was a really important first step for me. And being vulnerable in the front of people that I care for the most was a really important first step. And then actually integrating with the care network that we all have available to us, like the GP network, like the 10 sessions that we get through the government grants here in Victoria, to go and speak to someone who is trained in, hey, let's nip this in the bud. Not a big deal. If you pull your hamstring or your glute or whatever, you go to a physio. Well, everyone can benefit from a tune-up between the ears sometimes too. So, you know, viewing it as an athlete and saying, hey, if I had tweaked my hammy, if I had done anything physical, I'd go and see a specialist. Well, let's do the same thing when it comes to getting the care that I need to recover just with a different type of ailment. They're the really important things, because post those two big steps, talking to the people that you care for and your loved network, and also the professionals, mean that actually the rest is easier, because you're told what you should go and do and you're given advice, and you're able to then get onto that care pathway to mean that you can rebound really nice and quickly, as luckily as I did. But we unfortunately do tend to bottle it up or be embarrassed or be ashamed of some of these things. And I'm really hopeful that I can start to build on the great work that's been done with Beyond Blue and Black Dog and all of the other institutes, to make sure that people feel, hey, it's no different than going to the physio. It's just about seeing something that I need to get fixed.
And as you say, nipping it in the bud is one of the most important things. I know for me personally, when it happened to me a couple of decades ago, I was just thinking, I've got to hide this. This is so embarrassing. If anyone knew what I was thinking, they'd think I'm crazy. Just, I can get through this. I'll be fine. And then it just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled. But had I gone straight to the GP when I was having these panic attacks initially, I wouldn't have had to end up in a heap. And that's why I say to anyone I'm talking to, and you start to open up and you realize that everyone at some level is going to go through it at some point. So we're all going to have to learn these skills at some point, because life is just going to keep throwing these curveballs, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, we're lucky that some of the curriculum that our kids are learning is about kind of naming your emotions, explaining how it makes you feel, and then being able to get over it. Certainly growing up in the UK, going to a boarding school, we had no lessons where we were learning that, right? It was very, very different. So actually opening up to my kids and talking to my kids was really easy, because it was normal for them. It was normal for them to kind of name how they're feeling, think about how they could get over it, and find out what they could do next. And you know, I think there's some blessings in that, in the naivety of childhood, of going, well, yeah, just we'll get through it. And I thought that was a beautiful learning that I actually learnt off then. And like you said, if you do nip it in the bud early, it just becomes so much easier. And you do the catastrophizing that we tend to do around these things gets flushed out much, much quicker.
Yeah, challenging those thoughts. When you recognize what you're saying to yourself, a lot of people may not have ever stopped to think, oh, how am I talking to myself? And when you do, you can be really surprised by how hard it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to say, if you had to give one piece of advice to a leader of a business, and this is all new to them, what would you be suggesting?
Involve your people. So often the problems that you're trying to solve, the answers are within your business already, depending on the size of it, obviously. There is a huge amount of information out there. It's not often an issue of education. Often it's an issue with motivation. How do we get people to feel like they want to do this and continue to do it? People don't go to bed and then wake up the next day overweight, overstressed, diabetic. It's a long-term thing, which is hard because they do tend to get missed and we just gradually get worse. But actually, we've got a long time to step in. We've got lots and lots of junctures where we have the opportunity to step in. So the advice that I'd give to leaders is step in as soon as you can and involve your people in finding out what do they want and where are the barriers for them and what is the systemic things that are happening within your business that are stopping people being able to do their own self-care regimen that allows them to bring their best self to work for you. There's enough evidence out there now that shows engaged, healthy, happy employees create a better bottom line for you. So if we're in a situation where we're having to talk about return on investment or value or VOI, value on investment, we're probably having the wrong conversation. Those times are gone. We've proved out that there is value in looking after the health and happiness of your people. And the first step is asking your people, what are the things that we're doing that are unhelpful? What are the things that you need from us? And starting that conversation from a point of empathy of, I know it's tough right now. I know that we've asked a lot of you over the last 18 months. How can we get this ship on a better level playing field or an even keel?
So brilliant. Now you have some great workshops available, and do you also do personal coaching? What options do you have for us?
Yeah, so on my website, which is just ollybridge.com or builderbridgept.com, are all of my sessions around self-care, about anti-burnout, around building a performance pyramid for the business and individuals. So lots of things that we've sort of discussed in this call, but put into really simple workshops. But with certain organizations as well, I'll do much larger sessions and facilitate their workshops to make sure that, to go back to the earlier point around making sure that there's a golden thread going through the whole business around well-being. So how do we take a step back and less about doing an individual session and how we can actually help individuals, but actually how can we look at the framework of our business and actually see systemically how can we improve the well-being of our people from that stance as well. So lots and lots of things that we can do, but obviously lots of businesses are in different stages of their own journey. I'd love to help anyone or everyone in any way that I can.
Wonderful. Wow, so much amazing information you've just shared this morning. We hope to get you down to Geelong to the chamber really soon. So thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, and hopefully we'll see you in G-Town soon.
I would love that. Thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Olly. Bye.
Thanks.
I'm Angie Hilton, and thanks for listening to Unbreakable Entrepreneurs Podcast. If you've enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe and head to geelongchamber.com.au for more wellbeing tips. This has been brought to you by the Geelong Chamber of Commerce and the Partners in Wellbeing program.